Hello, everyone. Welcome to Resume Basics. Thank you for your patience as I had a little bit of a challenge logging in. My name is John Charles, and I am a career advisor at the American University Career Center. So for today, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how to create a good basic resume. I'm going to start with a little bit of a presentation. I won't bore you too long, I promise. And then I'll leave plenty of time for you to ask questions and to see if you have any particular details that you would like help on in your resume. If I may ask you along the way, feel free to ask questions. Now you can do so in the chat. You can also do so in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. What I will do next, and please let me know if there's any sound issues, any technical problems, please let me know, and I'll do my best to address those. So as we go, I would like to encourage you to type anything that comes to mind in the chat and or in the Q&A section. I'll do my best to follow along as quickly as I can so that I can address those in the course of this session. We are, it's scheduled, it says it's from 4 to 5 p.m. I'm actually going to finish this session before 5 p.m. My goal always in my presentations is to be complete within about 45 minutes, just because I think that's a more appropriate time. No one wants to sit for a full hour, at least I don't. And so what that means is we'll have at least 15 minutes for questions, right, from 4:30 to 4:45. So please know that we will be able to address any questions you have. Great. Okay. So thank you for your patience. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I hope that you can see that. Now, you're probably wondering, well, who's Marie Spalding? Marie is my colleague in the Career Center. She was kind enough to she created this basic resume guide and let me use it. So that's why I left her name on there. But again, I am John Charles. And if you ever need to reach me at the Career Center, my email is charles@american.edu. So as I explained, I'm going to go through this presentation just so that you see all the detail, because I know it's important whenever we do a webinar to make sure you have something concrete that you can respond to, that you can learn from. And then afterward, we can go through your particular situation where you're trying to write your own resume. You're trying to make sure you have a good document that you can use to apply for positions. All right, so let me continue here. So what can we, the people in the American University Career Center, what can we do to help you? Certainly we offer career advising, technical resources that might be useful in your career development. We have many events, of course, in fall 2021. They are all virtual. And we can also help you develop employer and alumni connections. Some of those are through events. Some of those would be through, for example, introductions on LinkedIn. That's a favorite way that I have to help students connect with alumni. So what is a resume? In case you didn't know, it's an individually designed document. So it's your own document, right? We can think of it as a marketing tool that will convince an employer to interview you. So we hope the employer sees your resume, is interested in what you have to say, and then will go ahead and call you in for an interview. When I say call you in, it might mean that it's a phone interview. It could be a Zoom interview. We say it's not a place for modesty because if you don't show us or tell us, demonstrate to us what you've done, we, the reader, don't know what it is that you've accomplished. So we don't want you to be too shy, all right? Now, the purpose is typically to get an interview with an employer, right? So we want to present the academic training, perhaps courses and or projects that we've done in our class work. We also want to show what awards and honors and other special recognitions we've received. We want to describe our experiences and accomplishments. To me, that's really the heart of the resume. And then we want to demonstrate the activities in which you have been involved. So these could be things outside of the classroom, outside of a job or an internship or a volunteer position. They could be things that you've accomplished in your own time. For example, over the years, I've worked with students who have done equestrian, like horse riding and fencing and played an instrument for many years. If you've done something for, let's say, 10 years, that's really impressive. And I think that is good to include on a resume. So what else goes into a resume? So we have a heading, which is the top of the resume. Usually that includes your name and contact information. Typically in a resume, we'll start with education. And under education, it could include honors, such as if you got let's say, a presidential scholarship or some other kind of, let's say, an award. And then I mentioned the relevant courses and projects, which I think is a really good thing to feature in a resume. We'll also talk about skills and as I mentioned before, other activities that might fall outside of the education and experience sections. In the heading, typically we have a name, your cell phone, email. Now the city and state is typically enough. Sometimes I'll see a student who has their dorm address on a resume, and I tell them, for purposes of personal security, let's leave the dorm number off and simply we can just have American University. We can simply have 4400 Massachusetts Avenue Northwest, Washington, D.C., 20016. That is sufficient. Some people might have their LinkedIn URL, or if you have your own website, your own portfolio, those are excellent things to include in the heading of your resume. As far as education goes, I do recommend typically that you put it at the top of your resume. And we'll begin with your most recent degree. If you're an undergraduate, it will be your only college degree. If you're a master's student or a PhD student, of course, you will have that degree above your undergraduate degree. Okay, when we say reverse chronological order, we mean most recent, then the item that happened before it, and then down to the oldest thing in the list. So in this example here, we have American University, and we have a degree and a graduation date. So for high school, I usually recommend for undergraduates who are first-year students, second-year students, certainly include your high school. Often we will remove high school by the third year or junior year. Although if you're applying for something back home, you might include it to show that you're a local, okay? And we did have a question. Thanks very much for this question, Riley. Should I put my actual home address or my American University address? Since one is permanent and one is not, I am unsure. So if you're applying for something in Washington, D.C., I recommend putting a local Washington, D.C. address. If you're applying for something back home, let's say in the summer, put your home address. In most instances, we're going to put our Washington, D.C. address. Thank you very much for that question. Okay, so this is the extent of my slides. I do believe. Let me just make sure. No, it's not. Sorry. Okay. So under education, if you did receive some kind of an academic scholarship or honors, like there at AU, we have many different kinds of honors programs. We have leadership programs, for example. The SPA leadership program is one. We would like to include that under the education section. The cumulative GPA, the major GPA, you may include those. You don't have to, but if you do, we should probably distinguish between whether it's your overall or cumulative GPA, or is it the GPA in your major. Generally, I tell people if your GPA is 3.5 or above, let's include it on the resume. If you like, you still don't have to. If it's below that, maybe we can leave it off. It's fine. You don't have to have it on there. There are some employers that do require that you show them the GPA. If that's the case, of course, we will include it, but most employers don't have that as a requirement. Now, study abroad can also come under this category, as can other kinds of specialized pieces of information, such as independent studies or a thesis. Okay, and sorry. All right. Now, we did have another question. Do I need to put exchanging student experience in the resume? So I believe, okay, so this question is about exchange student information. Well, if you were an exchange student from another country coming to American University, we would like to see, of course, American University, where you're studying now, but also your home institution. So I would include the home university where you are getting your degree. And in this case, it would go underneath American University because you're more recently studying at American University. I hope that answers your question there. Okay, so I now, I'm going to stop the share for a moment. And what I would like to do is, since we still have plenty of time here, I want to make sure that we are addressing particular questions you might have. So one thing I would like to do, and just bear with me as I go to the Career Center website, and I'm going to share my screen again. And when I do, what I'd like to show you is in the Career Center website, which some of you I know have seen, it looks like this. We do have a resume section. And in the top right here, we have resume examples and templates. So we have examples. I'm going to show you the first and second year undergraduate template. Bear in mind, there can be differences, right, depending on where you are in your studies. But I just want to show you a couple of features that could be useful for any student, regardless of where you are, what program you're doing. So we have a Word document that you could use as the basis for your resume. You could just take this document and put your information into it. And then we have a completed example of a resume. And what I want to highlight here is, first of all, this is a one-page document. Most employers will prefer that you have a one-page document. And so while there are exceptions, I think it's always a good idea for you to create a one-pager, as we call it. Maybe you'll have another version that you use for different purposes that is, say, 2 pages or longer, but one example of that could be a CV or a curriculum vitae, which CV is typically the term we use for academic resumes. So ones that are used, let's say, for someone who is a PhD or pursuing a PhD, where the information you include will have things such as publications or presentations, something a little bit different than most of our students at American University. So it's a very particular type of document is the CV. But for what we call the traditional resume, these are some of the features that I want to point out. And let me just briefly go to questions. Someone asked, as a first year, should we still include high school activities and awards on our resume? Great question. Thanks so much for that. And yes, because here's the thing. Your first year in college, you haven't had an opportunity to accumulate so many new experiences. So if you take off high school, you might not have anything left on your resume, which we don't want. So feel free to maintain your high school experiences on your resume, even as a first year college student, and even as a second year college student. What I'll say is, usually by the end of your second year in college is when we might remove most of the high school experiences. Okay. Another question: what do I do if my resume is longer than a page? Can I make the font smaller? Another really good question. So I would recommend not making the font too small. That can be very frustrating for people who don't have the greatest eyesight. Sometimes I have trouble reading resumes and it really frustrates me. So what I recommend is if your resume is more than one page, actually feel free to use 2 full pages and make sure your font is large enough. If you're having trouble creating a one-page resume, it's not the end of the world, but I do think it's a good exercise for you to create a one-page version that has a font size that's sufficient. So I'm talking about maybe 11-point, 12-point font. And then maybe instead of cutting down items that you have in your longer resume, just start from scratch and say, okay, what am I going to include in my one-page resume? You'll probably have to make decisions about things that you're going to need to take out. But I think it's a really good exercise for all of us to do. I'm guilty of having my resume is 2 pages. I'll be honest, I haven't worked on it or looked at it for quite a while. But even for someone like me, who's pretty far along in his career, I think it's a good exercise to figure out, like, how do I make decisions? How do I be selective about what I include so that I can make a one-page resume? All right. So let me make sure I've answered all the questions here. I think I have. And so what I'd like to do right now then is I want to go down and show you some different elements that might be very helpful to you as you build your resume. Here's what I like the most about this format. Do you see this section, relevant courses and projects? So what we have here is examples of academic projects that fictional Monique James has accomplished in her college career. You'll notice it's not simply a listing of courses. Now, it's okay if you have a short list of courses, you can include that in your resume. I think a better idea, however, is to show us a project, or in this case, a paper. So I've highlighted a 20-page paper that Monique wrote for her Politics in the United States class. It's called How the Federal Government Functions. Why is this useful? Because here's why. By putting a project, in this case, a paper that you've written in a class, you're signaling to the employer that you have expertise on a particular topic, right? In this case, politics in the United States and the federal government. So even though you haven't had a chance to get an internship, even though you haven't interned for, let's say, the State Department, you still have something that's very relevant and could be very interesting to that potential employer. So that's why I'm a huge fan of including a relevant project in your resume, and this is where it would go. You'll notice here, this person still has their high school. Now, even though they're due to graduate relatively soon, it's fine. Maybe they're applying for a job back home in Natick, Mass, and so they included their high school there. Okay, as far as the experience section goes, you'll notice there's an experience section. There's just one section in this resume. Sometimes I will advise students to use 2 experience sections. So the reason is, if they want to change the order of the items in the resume, you'll recall, remember we talked about the reverse chronological order. So the first item is most recent. The second item is the one before that. The third item is the one before that. Actually, I see a mistake here. Sorry about that. Technically, the Kennedy Political Union should be the second item. No, it should be the first item. I apologize for this incorrectness here. So the reason why is because it continues, right? So it's still a present experience, but it began in January 2021. It began more recently than the Center for Community Engagement and Service. So for that reason, Kennedy Political Union should be the first item in this resume. Now, if you create 2 sections, so let's say you create a relevant experience, and then you have another section that's called other experience. The benefit of doing that is that it allows you to change the order. So let's say, for example, let's think of a good example. Maybe I'm applying for a leadership role, right? And I want SPA leadership to be the first position. But because it started later, right? It started after Kennedy Political Union. It's not going to be the first thing. But if I have a relevant experience section, I could put the SPA leadership program entry in that section. If I wanted to, I could leave it all by itself, and then everything else would follow under it in the other experience section. So this allows me to emphasize a particular kind of position so that the reader, the employer, will see it and will pay more attention to it. So that would be one difference that you could do. If you don't have a need such as that, it's fine to have one experience section. Okay, I noticed that there's a couple more questions. Do I need to tell people what language that I'm good at, or do I need to tell them I'm excellent in English and Mandarin native speaker because my first language is not English? Great question. So why don't we take a moment and just go down to the bottom and look at skills. So here, typically in the skills section, we include computer skills, language skills. Sometimes we'll include other kinds of certifications. Let's say you got Microsoft Excel certification, or maybe you had first aid CPR certification. That would be where you would put that information. Now for language skills, thank you for that question. It's an excellent one. Yes, we want to know that you're a native Mandarin speaker. And then for English, if you can think about, well, what is your English level? So if you are studying at a university in the United States, your English is decent enough, right, to be able to handle English language classes. So I would say that your English is probably advanced. It might be fluent, but if you're uncomfortable, advanced is a good term to use if you feel you're not quite fluent. And that goes for English speakers who are studying foreign languages. So in this example, we have limited working proficiency, elementary proficiency. So elementary proficiency, of course, is a very low level of ability. Limited working proficiency is going to be higher, but other terms you could use, intermediate, and then of course, advanced and fluent and native. Okay, thanks very much. That's a very useful piece of information. How many bullet points should we limit ourselves to when describing skills for the given experience? Yes, great question. What I usually tell people is, let's try to keep it to 4 bullet points at the most. If you don't have so many experiences, if you don't have so many items, you might have room to include more. So maybe you could push it to 5. Usually though, if you go above 5, it becomes a little bit blocky, lots of text to look at. So I prefer, my sort of preferred amount is 4 or fewer bullet points. And usually I'd say at least 2. So 2, 3, 4 is a nice number. Okay. I want to make sure that I've addressed all of those questions. Okay. Now, let me just go back to the, okay, chat. Thank you for those questions. I appreciate it. So what I wanted to say about the descriptions, and how are we on time? We're approaching, it's 4:26. So I'm going to spend just a few more minutes talking about what I think constitutes a good basic resume. And then at 4:30, we can open it up to actual spoken questions if you like. So you'll notice a couple of things about these descriptions. Look at the beginning. So they all start with an action verb: maintain, share, support, participate, develop, promote, research. When you start with an action verb, it helps the reader to get a focus on what you're saying. So I recommend that you use an action verb at the beginning of every bullet point, at the beginning of every description. The other thing you'll notice about these descriptions is we have quantities, numbers. We have information about how many members there are. We have a dollar amount down here. How much money did the person handle? These are all good things to include because they show us the scope or the extent to which you are doing something. It shows us the detail, which is important. Detail is important because it tells us when we see the specifics, we know we have a better sense of what you're doing, and that's always helpful. All right, so those are just a few things. I don't want to get into too much detail because this is a basic resume session. So the point is simply to help you to get started and to complete your resume. That's our number one goal in doing this session. I see we have another question. How and where can we include clubs we are in? Or should we only include ones that are relevant to the job we are applying to? Another great question. Thank you. This is really a good point that I didn't even mention. I believe that clubs are actually very good to include on a resume. So how and where to include them? I would include them much the same way as you do volunteer positions and even jobs. I think you can include them in the experience section, and you can provide descriptions in the same manner. And that question also included, should we only include ones that are relevant to the job we are applying to? Another really good question. My tendency is to say you can include clubs that don't apply directly to the position you're applying for. Why is that? The reason is because even if, say, one of my favorite clubs on campus is the Cheese Club. I think that's a great idea. Let's say that you're president of the Cheese Club. Now, you might think, well, cheese is not related to international affairs, but being president, being a leader is relevant to almost any position, right? And employers tell this to us again and again. They say, we like students who participate in campus activities. We really value leadership skills and the benefit that those bestow on students who take part in those experiences. So my tendency is to say, yes, let's include those things. Let's include those clubs, student activities, student organizations, even when we think that it's not directly related. Now, one caveat would be space. If you don't have enough space, you might not be able to include that student experience, or you might have to reduce or remove the description of it, but at least you could still list it. And I think that's a good idea. Thanks so much, everyone. These questions are really helpful and they make it a lot more interesting. Now, it looks like we've handled all the questions. So at this point, what I'd like to do is I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I want to ask all of you if you have a particular question that you'd like to ask. Unfortunately, because we're in the webinar format, you're not going to be able to come off mute, but let me know and I can address it for you. So let me know in the chat, let me know in the Q&A. What I'm trying to get at here is, besides the pieces, the nuts and bolts of a resume, are there more general questions you have about how to use the resume, when to send it to someone, how to use other documents in addition to your resume? Of course, a cover letter is a very important document that people use in their applications. We're not going to talk about doing a cover letter right now, but I want you to think about other aspects of the application process after you do your resume. So we did have a point. So the question had to do with, I'm struggling with demonstrating impact on my resume on VMOC. How do I improve my impact? For those of you who don't know, in the Kogod School of Business, VMOC is a tool that gives a score, it gives an assessment of how well the resume addresses certain things. And so demonstrating impact has to do with, remember how I was talking about showing your results, showing success or accomplishments. It can be very difficult to do that on a resume. So how do you do that? Well, one way is through word choice. So what I would say is that if, for example, on your resume, you are able to insert words that include succeeded. So succeeded in creating, or accomplished, so think about the words that carry with them a sense of impact. I think that might help. So thanks for that question, Vivian. I think that might be the sort of the best way to address it, is to try to use those word choices that might lend themselves to showing impact. Someone was asking about having to meet with the Career Center to check your resume in person. And certainly we hope that many of you who are on this call will be encouraged to do so. So the step to do that would be to log into your Handshake profile, to the Handshake system, and you can ask for for an appointment that way. If you're unsure of how to do that, you can send an email to careercenter@american.edu, and a member of our staff will help you. But that would be the next step, is to set up an appointment to meet with one of us in the Career Center. Okay, great. So at this point, unfortunately, because of the setup of the webinar, we're unable to just allow you to start talking, which would be my preference. So what I'll say is, I'll ask you for any other questions that you might have. Please, this is your chance to ask them. And then as a next step, I encourage you to go to the Career Center website. If you're a student in the School of International Service, there are other resources as well on Handshake that are available to you. If you are a student in the Kogod School of Business, you also have a separate career office, as does the School of International Service for juniors, seniors, and graduate students. But on the Career Center website, so american.edu/career center, you can find useful resources that will help you to take advantage of opportunities, let's say, to meet with employers, to learn from them, and to find out about opportunities that they have. So I hope that this basic resume session is just an entry point so you feel comfortable with what you're going to put on your resume. And then the next step will be to craft it and to make changes over time as you gain new experiences. And we are here every step of the way to help you with those edits and those changes. There is another question, so I'll get to that now. How would you write about a job in your hometown that you currently have, but are on a break from because you live in a different city? Yes, common situation, right? So technically you're still in that job. You're just not doing it now while you're in college. What I tell people to do is say to present. In other words, let's say you began that job in 2018. You could say September 2018/present. Now, technically, right, today you're not working in that job, but you will be probably during the winter break or in the summer. So that's acceptable to put to present, okay? Now we have another question about the fact that I'm an MBA with more than 10 years post-grad working experience. In terms of work experience, how many must I include on the resume? Must I include only a maximum of 2 bullets per company I have worked for? So this is another good sort of question to ask, right? So if you have a lot of working experience, right, you can be selective about what you include on your resume, certainly. And some people will omit certain positions that they have because they don't, for whatever reason, they don't think that it serves them to put it on the resume. So the question is, must I only include a maximum of 2 bullets per company I've worked for? So my preference is actually not to, I get it, right? You have so many positions. So in order to make them fit, you limit the description to 2 bullets. My inclination here would be to say, for the positions that are most significant, I would include more bullets, right? I might include even up to 6 bullets for some of them, especially if you've been in those positions for a long time. Now, this leads us back to the question of resume length. Now, in the business world, there is a strong preference for a 1-page resume. However, for people with, senior experience, many of them do have two-page resumes. So I think there's a balance here. You might have a two-page version where you're able to include more information. On a one-pager, you might limit some of the entry, some of the positions. You might remove some of them so that you have more space for the other ones. I hope that's helpful. Okay, everyone. It is a little earlier than 4:45, which I declared would be my cutoff, but I think we've covered most of the important subject matter of this session. Thank you so much for tuning in and for being here. And if you're watching this at a later date, I hope you also can benefit from the questions that we had asked, which were excellent. So thank you again. Remember, www.american.edu/career center is maybe the next place for you to take a look, and keep at it. And I wish you all the best. Stay safe and healthy. And again, you can reach me if you need to contact me. My email is charles@american.edu. And I am John Charles. Thanks so much, everyone. Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye.